The Windigo's Return, a Northwoods Story. Ninga debachim wichi manaduch. Once, long ago, in the days of the grandfathers, something strange happened in the North Woods, the land of the Ojibwe. It was a time when everything was good, and the people had all they needed to live. Summer brought many geeses, the blueberry moon. There was golden sunshine and just enough rain, so the berries grew plump and juicy. The fishing, too, was good, and no one went hungry. Later, as the nights turned cool, came Manomanike geeses, the rice-making moon. This was the time of the wild rice harvest, the gathering of Manoman. Along the shallow shorelines the stalks were heavy with grain, and the people gathered it gently into their birch-bark canoes. They offered prayers of thanks to Gichimanato, the Great Spirit. No one could remember a better time, until one day, when something strange happened. One of the hunters did not return after spending all day in the forest. Someone said, "He has wounded a deer, and was tracking it down when grandfather's son made his evening lodge. In the morning, our hunter will return, with much meat," so the people did not worry. But morning came, and the hunter did not return. A woman went to the stream for water, and she did not return. Now the people began to wonder. Later an old grandmother went into the woods to gather firewood. She did not come back. Now a dark fear crept through the village, like smoke from a dying campfire. The people gathered here and there in small groups and talked in whispers, pointing fearfully toward the forest. "Why are our people disappearing?" they asked. "What terrible thing is happening to our village?" In one place the white-hairs or elders gathered. They had seen many winters, and their hair had turned white like the snow. As they talked of the disappearances, a white-haired man named Waboos began to remember a story he had heard long ago, when he was very small. In the old story, people disappeared without a trace, never to be seen again. As Waboos talked, his memory became clear, and suddenly he knew. He knew that there was a Windigo in the forest, and that the Windigo was eating the people. A little girl named Wabun Anong, Morning Star, was standing nearby. "My grandfather," she asked, "what is a Windigo?" "A Windigo, my granddaughter, is a terrible giant of the forest," said Waboos, "and his ways are very strange. One of the strangest things about him is this. You might be out in the forest, sitting down, or walking, or gathering firewood, when you hear a sound. Tromp! 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 The great heavy footsteps of the Windigo. You might turn around very slowly to see what it is, or you might turn around very quickly, but no matter how slowly or how quickly you turn, you will never see the Windigo. This is because he has the power to turn himself into anything he wants, a boulder perhaps, or a birch tree, or an old stump. So you never know where the Windigo is until he has you. And by then, granddaughter, it is too late." Morning Star listened with wide eyes, and her mind was full of questions, but words would not come. Waboos stroked her hair tenderly. "It is all right, granddaughter. We will think of something," he said with a smile. That evening the people held a council meeting to decide what to do about the terrible Windigo. They sat in a circle around the fire. Soon a warrior stood up. "We must gather all our weapons," he said, "and go out to do battle with this Windigo." A shout of approval went up from the people. Surely all the warriors together could defeat one Windigo. But then someone remembered that the Windigo could turn into anything it wanted. It might not be so easy to do battle with a tree stump or a boulder, especially if the warriors didn't know which one to fight. The people grew quiet. Next, one of the white-hairs stood up. "This Windigo knows where we live," he said. "Let us move our village to a new place far from here." Everyone murmured and nodded their approval. But then someone remembered that since the Windigo already knew where the people were, he could just follow them through the forest, capturing them and eating them one by one. Again everyone fell silent. Not a word was said until far to the back of the council ring a little girl spoke up. It was Morning Star. "I think we should trap him," she said. "How would we do it?" the people asked. "We must go far into the forest," answered Morning Star, "and dig a deep pit. In the bottom of the pit we will place some venison, and all around the venison we will put birch bark and logs and sticks. Then we will cover up the pit with long grass and leaves, so the Windigo cannot tell it is there." The little girl's idea made sense, and the next day the people did just as she had said. By nightfall the pit was ready. Everyone hid in the forest behind trees and bushes and waited for the Windigo to come. Deep in the middle of the night, when it was very dark, they heard a sound. Trump! 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 The Windigo was coming. Then another sound. Sniff! 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 He was smelling the venison they left in the pit, or else he was smelling the people. No one could be sure. Suddenly there was a great crash, and then they knew that they had caught the Windigo. Quickly the people ran to the edge of the pit. Each one had saved a little glowing ember from the council fire. Now they threw the embers down into the pit, and the birch bark and sticks and logs began to burn. Soon a great fire was roaring in the bottom of the pit, and the Windigo began roaring too, screaming and howling in anger. The people were frightened and ran back to their hiding places. Later, when it was quiet, they crept to the edge of the trap. They looked down, and there in the fiery pit was the Windigo, and he was furious. "I'll get you all for this," he roared as he shook his great fist. "I'll come back and again and again and again, and I'll eat you and you and you and your children and their grandchildren forever and ever." Terrified, the people fled once more into the forest. This time they waited long time until there was no sound at all coming from the pit. Then finally they sneaked up very, very slowly. They looked into the pit and saw nothing. There was nothing there but a pile of ashes, all that was left of the terrible Windigo. Still, the people remembered the awful curse of the Windigo and wanted to make sure he could not return to eat them all, as he had promised. "Gather the ashes," said Waboos, "and take them to the top of the high hill where the night winds blow." The people did as he said, and when they reached the top of the hill they threw the ashes high into the air. The night winds blew the tiny ashes, scattering them all over the north woods, and the Windigo was no more, gone to the land of the shadows. Hurrah! The people breathed a great sigh of relief. They laughed and shouted and hugged one another with happiness. They returned to their village and began to live happily once more. The autumn nights grew longer and the mornings white with frost, and the people moved to their winter hunting grounds. The Windigo did not return. Later, Geweden, the north wind, came blowing his icy breath. Through the long cold moons the snow piled up in deep drifts, and the lakes froze like flat, smooth stones, and the Windigo did not return. Then came Iskamaziki Disis, the maple sugar time. This was a time of joy and feasting as the people gathered together once more to tap the maple trees and to celebrate the end of winter. Soon after that came the budding seeds time and the warm blush of spring, the flower moon. The people planted corn and pumpkin and squash, and still the Windigo did not return. In fact, the people had almost forgotten about the terrible Windigo. Then, one day in early summer, 3 of the people sat by a lake, fishing. It was Morning Star and her little brother, and Waboos, the old grandfather. "Ah!" shouted little brother suddenly, and struck his arm. "Oh!" cried Morning Star, and slapped the back of her hand. "Aye!" they both shouted, as they swatted themselves here and there. Waboos looked closely, and he noticed something strange. Though there was no fire anywhere nearby, little ashes seemed to be floating in the air. The ashes drifted through the woods and gathered in a cloud around the 3 friends. When Waboos held out his arm, he noticed that the ashes were landing on his skin and biting him. And where the ashes bit, they left a little bump that itched and itched and itched. "It is the Windigo, grandfather," cried Morning Star. "He has come back." Waboos nodded. "Yes, my granddaughter," he said, and smiled knowingly. "And I am afraid he will be coming back every summer from now on and eating all of us, just as he said he would." Waboos arose and took the children's hands. Together they turned down the path toward the village to tell the people. And so it was that the Windigo returned, and returns every summer to this day, keeping the promise he made so long ago. Me sa you.